Hey everyone, welcome to Past Lives and the Divine. I'm Gina, and this is the podcast where we talk about our connection to our past lives and the divine out there and the divine inside each and every one of us. And this episode here today, we are on the divine side of things. So in today's episode, we are talking about astrology and a little bit of self-care, specifically like how we can use the energies of this season, the Aries season, to, just like understand ourselves better. One of the things that I really like about astrology is how it can be really clarifying for things we're already feeling, or things like my Aries moon, for example, we talk about in this episode, or like Saturn return. A lot of my clients are going through Saturn returns, or they're like in those times, and that's kind of like late 20s or late 50s or late 80s. But it seems like, my clients are kind of all over the board, but a big chunk of them are like late 20s or kind of like late 50s, early 60s. So I've personally just had questions about Saturn return, which is another reason why I love these episodes. So I brought it up. So if you're kind of in that space, you might want to hang out a little bit closer to the end where I ask my Saturn return question. Anyway, what I like about astrology is the fact that like we can understand those transits, or like where certain planets are in our birth chart. And then from there, we can just understand more about ourselves. And the more we can understand about ourselves, I feel like the easier it is to have compassion for the things that like maybe aren't our favorite, but are too difficult to change, or we just haven't been able to change it, or it's just not an option, or it might be something that you like about yourself. Like, I like that I'm fiery. I like that I, just like want to get up and go. I like that things become boring quickly. I don't know. Is it bad? Yeah, in some instances it's bad, or it has maybe pulled me off a track that I wanted to be on. But overall, if I can just know that that's a part of who I am, then I can make choices based on that, instead of make choices in some fantasy world where I'm someone else, and then I can get to those results of those choices and like not feel great or beat myself up because I have these natural tendencies. And I love that about astrology. So it's my understanding from the downloads and from the emails I get that you all love these astrology episodes as much as I do. So I am super excited to dive into that today. But before we dive in, I have a couple of announcements. So you've heard me talk about before about March 31st, Ashley Sondergaard, who's on this podcast episode, and I are doing a yoga and hypnosis class. It's a restorative yoga and then a group hypnosis journey. And it's just a beautiful, seamless transition from one to the other. You spend your time in restorative yoga just being like totally nourished, relaxed, and your mind is just being primed to relax. So you can go further and faster into the hypnotic journey. So if you are on our email lists, either Ashley's or mine, either one, you got the link a few days ago. Well, when this comes out, it'll be over a week. But in the 2 days, we are, I think, about half sold out. So if you are not on our email list, hop on our email list so you can get early access to sign up for an event like that. And if you do not want to get our emails, then you can just wait, and it opens up to the public. This comes out March 19th. It opened to the public on March 17th. I have a feeling it might be sold out, but click the link in the show notes, get on our email list if this is something that interests you, because we do these every once in a while. The next thing that I have is my update on the 50,000 downloads. This episode is released on March 19th, 2021. I'm recording this about a week before. I have just crossed over the 47,000 downloads. So I am like so close. And I am kind of that weirdo where I don't normally set goals, and I don't really give a shit about getting to them. Like, I kind of do, but it's not gonna like ruin my day if a week from today I'm at like 49,000 downloads. I'm so close. And what's more important to me is that you all are like sharing this podcast and you're having more conversations with your friends about it. And many of you have said, like, I get emails from people or DMs on Instagram, and it'll be like, my friend told me I had to listen to you. I sat on it for 3 months and now I'm here and I can't stop listening. And it makes me so happy because I think it's probably a small percentage of the population that would really get a kick out of these conversations. And so it just makes me so happy when I can meet you all. If you are interested for whatever reason in how close I am to that at the release of this episode, I will be updating my email list. And they actually got an email this morning with a little bit more of an updated number, a little bit more of an update on that goal. But hop on that email list. Again, there it is. That's another sign. Get on the email list, pastlivesandthedivine.com/subscribe, and you can hop on there and be in the know about it all, about all the things going on. So not only the gatherings, the online stuff, the workshops, but also, if you are on my email list, check your email, because with this episode, I've also added a new hypnotic track to the shop. So if you listen to this podcast episode and you're like, I need a little bit more of this, I need to harness my power a little bit more, whatever that looks like for you, I added a hypnotic track into the shop. And if you're on my email list, you get it for $4 this weekend. I usually once a month add a track to the shop, and whenever I do that first weekend, people on my email list get it for $4. So hop on over there, and that hypnotic track is designed for you to download it, listen to it, and the intention for this journey is to know, understand, use your soul gifts, your personal power, so you can feel like you're living like to your more potential, more exciting, more fire, more thrill. Enjoy like Earth's pleasures while clearly seeing the power of your soul self. Feels good when we can do this. It feels good when we can see our power, feel our power. And if you're craving a little bit of that in your life, head over to the shop. Those tracks are $12. But if you're on my email list, you get it this weekend for $4. And as always, check the show notes. I have a link to the shop, and I have information about other coupon codes that are always relevant in my shop. So check the show notes on this page. Okay, that's it. Those are my announcements. Are you ready for this conversation with Ashley and Meredith? Ashley from Yoga Magic Podcast and Meredith from Earthling Astrology. Let's get started. Everyone, I am back with Meredith and Ashley in our third monthly episode for this year, examining the different astrological energies for this time of year. And we're going to be covering Aries in this episode. Meredith is going to take us on a little journey of information. And then Ashley, as always, is going to give us some self-care with this energy in mind. Okay, so I'm going to first start with a question, and you're not going to answer it right now, you guys, but you're just going to think about it.
Okay.
So the question is, when you introduce yourself in like a minute or two, say something that maybe most people assume about you, but is not true. So like, does someone assume something about you a lot that just like is not the truth? So just noodle that as I'm talking. Okay, so before we do that, like I said, this is the episode where we take the season that we're moving into or that we've just moved into, and in this case, it's Aries. We talk about the energy of it, starting with Meredith's expertise, and then Ashley's going to move us through those ideas of self-care again. Okay, and then Meredith, one more thing. I love how you say we are all the signs. So if you're like, I don't have Aries anywhere, I don't know anything about it, no matter where it falls in your chart, we all have this energy in our chart and we're all influenced by the energy around us. So dive into your birth chart. We will give a little free, I'll link in the show notes, a place to go get your birth chart for free. So you can kind of poke around and see what works for you with the energies around us. Check out the previous episodes on Aquarius and Pisces energy, episode 38 and 44. Okay, that's it. That's my housekeeping. Meredith, tell people about you.
Yes. So my name is Meredith McCowan. I own Earthling Astrology in St. Paul, Minnesota. I started my practice about 3.5 years ago and spent 17 years in a very sciencey corporate career before that. And about 2.5 years ago, I started working with a psychic. So that enhanced my practice a lot. And about a year ago, I started working with a yoga instructor that's on the show today named Ashley, which really enhanced my practice as well too, because I didn't do a lot with like the physical body and astrology. I was more on the mental, emotional, spiritual realm of it. So yeah, that's my spiel. And then thinking about what I don't get that a lot, but some people assume astrologers are psychics and some are. So there's a handful of astrologers that are intuitives as well and do other things. And I don't consider myself very psychically attuned. I am developing that gift in myself, but that's not something that I automatically have. And sometimes I get people, asking for more psychic information when I'm more of like a mad scientist with the symbols and the math and the astronomy. So that's one thing, if I could think of quickly, that people might think about me that's not entirely accurate. Does that answer?
Oh my
Is that what you're looking for?
That's so good because I made that assumption about you.
Really? Did you really?
For whatever reason, that was one of the things, like, someone asked me, like, is she a psychic? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's intuition wrapped up in there, but I just assumed it was like a bigger part of it than what you just said. But what you just said, when you say that, it's like, oh, duh. Yes, that's Meredith.
Yeah, and there is a level of intuition you have to have when you look at a chart. So, but mine is more like, okay, this planet, say it's like Mars or something, is like really loud. And normally I wouldn't plan on talking about Mars with a particular person, but for whatever reason in the session, I'm like really pulled. And that's just kind of how I follow my intuition, but it's not necessarily psychic.
Okay.
That's interesting. That actually, I'm glad I said that since I didn't know that you assumed that about me.
Yes, me too. All right. Ashley, little intro, little something people assume about you.
Ooh, this is like, I like this. It's like way better than your, I don't know, icebreakers at camp or whatever. But I'm Ashley, Ashley Sondergaard. I am a yoga teacher. I'm the host of the podcast Yoga Magic, where we talk about self-care, self-discovery in hopefully an entry-level way so that everyone can kind of try on different modalities, see what works for them. And then I work one-on-one with individuals to help build self-care into their life. I have little self-care guides that I use your birth chart to develop. And then Meredith and I do these very fun Saturday night yoga and astrology parties. And they're like, I don't know. You were talking, Gina, earlier, how like you look forward to hanging out. I never used to look forward to working on a Saturday night except for those parties because they're so fun. So I love chatting with you guys. As far as things that people would assume about me, I don't know if you've done that like Instagram trend on where you like ask people to assume something about you, and I've never done it. It seems. Have you done it, Gina? It's a very interesting like practice, but I'm like, I can't. I don't really want to know what people assume about me. However, I imagine people. Right. I imagine that people, because I am in like the self-care and wellness space, they assume that I eat really healthy, and I do not. I'm the world's like worst. I don't know, quote unquote unhealthy. We had this weekend pizza and cheeseburgers and French fries 2 times. And you know what? Like during the week, I'll probably eat something really delicious and healthy. I'll try to at least, but I try not to label myself as a healthy eater because I try to follow my intuition on what my body needs. And sometimes it's a flipping cheeseburger. So there you go.
Yes.
Totally.
Yes. All right, Meredith, are we ready to hop into it? Okay. So Pisces, I felt like I didn't know anything. And so Aries, I feel like when I was like, okay, what are we going to talk about here? I'm like, I know Aries only through, when I think of Aries, I'm going to tell you the weird story that I think of, because someone once, Meredith, is this true? Like your moon is kind of like who you were as a kid or your emotion self or something like that?
It's more of your instincts, habit, unconscious self. So I think of the moon as like how your body reacts before your brain kicks on.
Okay, well, this is a great example.
Okay.
And it's also, I've heard someone say that it's where you feel the safest. Like your moon is how you act when you feel the safest. So when you think of like as a child, like when you feel safe, you would act out. That's sometimes where that can come from. So
I like that.
Oh my God. Okay. So my memory, this is what I think of when I think of Aries. My memory is I was maybe like 2 or 3. I wasn't even as tall as like the countertops in the kitchen. And my mom did something and I was so pissed off about it that I remember lifting up my favorite record, which I was holding, I don't know why, and smashed it on the kitchen floor. And I can just see it in pieces on the kitchen floor. And I was just like immediately in my toddler mind was just like, motherfucker. Now I'm like double mad because now my favorite fucking record is broke. And it was just like, I mean, and that kind of shit, like cut off your nose to spite your face, I used to do all the fucking time. I mean, I'm so glad I've like let a lot of that go, but that's what I think of when I think of Aries. Is that like dysfunctional Aries, or am I way off?
Well, that's an Aries moon. So your body reacted before your little 2-year-old brain could say, don't break my favorite record. Like, you have a fiery moon. That was a fire reaction. It's just like this bubbling up and very reactive kind of thing. And you would have to work hard to kind of stop that reaction and learn how to respond to triggers or anything that was pissing you off. Yeah, that's a good Aries moon.
That's been a big part of my journey.
Okay.
I might need to you might need to teach me some things, because my eldest daughter is an Aries sun and a Leo moon.
Ooh,
so
fire.
Just fiery flipping. Yeah. Like, let's talk about the things that we're breaking in our house, shall we?
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh, totally. Oh man.
Oh, this is going to be the breaking stuff episode. Aries.
All right, Meredith. Start
Okay.
us off in this portal. Tell us everything we need to know, the highlights of Aries.
Yeah, I was talking to you ladies before we started recording with my disclaimer is even though I'm an astrologer, Aries is the sign that I struggle with the most. And I think a big part of it is I don't have any planets in Aries in my chart. In my personal chart, Aries is kind of buried. So it's a very foreign energy to me. And then I'm going to talk about like kind of the textbook stuff for Aries, but then in my practice, like the Aries moon and suns don't always line up with the textbook either. So it's like a sign that all signs, you will always keep learning about all of them. But yeah, I will give you my spiel on Aries. So it's Aries season always starts around the spring, or starts on the spring equinox, which is usually March 21st or around that date every year. And it's a cardinal sign, which means it starts a season. So we start spring, and it's a fire sign. So Aries is considered the sign that sprung us all to life. Think of it as like pure energy, just raw fuel. Aries people need to move, need to move their bodies, need to get things out. It's ruled by the planet Mars, which is the red planet, of course. And once in a while, actually probably statistically quantifiable amount of time, I see like red hair with Aries or something red, like they get really blush cheeks if they get upset, or sometimes Aries will get rashes. That's because that sign is ruled by the red planet Mars. Aries is the warrior. Think of the archetype of the hero's journey. That is Aries in a nutshell. So Luke Skywalker, can't think of any other heroes right now, but there's a million. They're also like the risk takers of the zodiac, which this is what trips me up, because I'll usually ask every person with Aries, like, are you a risk taker? And I don't get 100% yes. And you two, that'd be a great question to ask both of you, because Gina, Aries moon, Ashley, Aries rising. I mean, do you guys consider yourself risk takers?
Yeah, on some level.
Do you? Okay.
I'm not like on a roller coaster, but like I would say it's more in the way I live my life.
Okay.
Like I would risk having to live out of my Prius before taking a corporate job that I used to have.
And how about you, Ashley?
Risk like that.
I'm shaking my head no. And I actually have a little bit of a theory on why, because I'm in agreement that Aries is hard energy. I'm an Aries rising. You'd think I would understand it, to like really grasp. And I think part of it is that, right, it's the sign of the self. It knows who it is. And we're not really allowed to do that. Like in the world that we live in, we have to be molded into all these different things. So like to really fucking own who you are is kind of rare. So no, I don't feel like I'm a risk taker. Because I've been conditioned to play V safe. And, the minute that I do something kind of risky, like quit my safe job and start a podcast and my own business, I'm always like very rewarded.
Interesting. I really, really like your theory. Because as kids, Aries are the adventurers. They want to jump out of planes. They want to live in their Prius. They want to jump off the swing set. And then very early on, we're told not to do that because you can break your body and you can fall off cliffs. And maybe, the Aries, people with heavy Aries energy start to like program themselves not to express that energy. So it can be kind of dormant. I like your theory, Ashley, for sure.
Ooh, wow. Yeah. I love that, like, that bit, Ashley, that you said about like owning who you are. And part of it is like, that's a lot of us don't know that really. I mean, I guess I don't know if I'm actually connecting the dots for anybody else if you're not inside my own brain, but I've been thinking about that a lot of like, I think a lot of suffering can happen from like, I don't know who I am or what I need. I've been told I shouldn't need certain things, or and because of that, I'm like suffering. And because of that, I'm lashing out, or because of that, I'm taking advantage of people. But so just that idea of like this energy of knowing who you are and some sort of confidence in it. And then the ability to like say, and it's a hard energy because most of us spend our entire lives trying to figure out who we are.
Right. And Aries might have an extra emphasis on that because it's more of a soul, like a moon Aries soul purpose to like really identify with who you are in a physical body. And that would be your maybe hero's journey. Is that just the journey of the self? What I do, another keyword for Aries is competitive. They're the ram, always button heads with people. So I do hear that more from Aries, that they are competitive, maybe not so much with other people, but with themselves. Really put that kind of like need to win or need to, be the victorious in whatever they're dealing with. So I do get more of that than the thrill seeking and risk taking positive responses.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
And, Aries, since it's a fire sign, more on the negative vibe, can be a little hot-headed, a little outspoken, maybe hot temper. And once in a while, if they're doing too much Aries, like a little narcissistic, can't see past their own nose sometimes, or maybe take things personally when no need to take everything personally. And that's, again, more of the negative vibration. There's a negative and positive expression of all of these energies in the birth chart. And I believe it's free will, free choice on how we choose to express them. So that's Aries in a nutshell. Again, it's a tough sign for me, but I love learning. So I'm always asking the typical textbook Aries questions when I meet Aries people. And I do get a mix of responses. But Ashley, now that you said that, I'm going to kind of maybe chisel away at more childhood programming when I'm talking to more Aries clients of mine.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite activity. Reprogramming ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. Unlearning everything we've been taught.
Oh, Ashley, do you want to add anything to that? And then before you go into the little bit of a self-care bit, like ways to use that energy, anything you want to add about the Aries energy?
It's like, so my journey as an Aries rising has been so interesting because it's this whole self-study journey, right? Like that's the point. And I love talking about this because it's never ending and there's so many ways that we can do it. And so much of what I'm going to talk about as relates to self-care is, related to self-study. But you're talking about competitive, and I'm thinking about sort of how this shows up. And again, I'm using my children a lot in these examples, but I get to see this play out live time in sort of these unconditioned little bodies and brains. And so my daughter, who's an Aries sun, will, how this like competition or even sort of that fire comes up is, so if I say to my youngest daughter, wow, you did such a good job eating your food, Lily, the eldest, the Aries, will be like, didn't I do a good job, Mom? So it's like, that's the example of, they're competitive about something that doesn't have to be competitive, right? Like you don't have to automatically assume that because I'm saying something nice to one child that you're not doing a good job. And I think how this shows up, again, live time here, Aries rising, how this shows up is like, I'll be, be scrolling social media and I'll see someone has 30,000 followers and I'll be like, wow, like that's cool. I must not be doing something right. Right? Like, that's where my brain goes. And so for an Aries, it's about bringing the power back to you rather than looking and comparing yourself and being competitive about other people. bring the power back to you. And I think actually like being competitive to yourself can be a really healthy thing when it's channeled in the right way, but own that power back, because there's a lot there. The Aries is like flipping ruled by Mars. It's going to get shit done. And you know, we're just so conditioned to look at everybody else and be somebody else and be what we're told to do, that I think Aries, it doesn't always know where to land. So if I'm a good lifetime example of like the trial and error of an Aries, I'd love to help people on that.
Oh, that's really interesting story about your daughters, because your one daughter was like, what about me? That's an Aries question. What about me? What about me, Mom?
Yep, it's all about,
interesting. And Ashley, as I'm looking at your chart, your North Node is in Aries, Ashley.
Right.
You know that.
Right.
And that means that you're here to learn Aries and incorporate it. And I think you launching self-care practices is so part of your soul contract. And also in the shamanic tradition, which I haven't studied in depth, they think the rising sign is what's rising within you. So Ashley, as you age, like you'll head more towards that Aries vibration and find balance. And you launching a self-care business basically is so part of your contract. I think it's
wow. Yeah, that is, I'm just taking it all in. Okay.
I love it when it all lines up, right? Like,
oh my God. Okay. So tell me a little bit, Meredith or Ashley, tell me a little bit about like one of the things I thought about when I think about my moon in Aries. Another question I have is like, I'm sure it means something if you're born under a dark moon or a new moon or a full moon. And so I was born under a full moon, is my understanding. What does that signify anything?
Yeah, you're kind of on the cusp with a full moon. You're not quite exact, but yeah, full moons, there's a couple different theories. In evolutionary astrology, the thought is you've been repeating things for lifetimes, and this is a lifetime to let it go, to illuminate something you've been repeating, and that's the evolutionary theory. Full moon babies and people kind of have like an angel devil sometimes, a really strong push-pull in their lives, and that would depend on the personal chart. But are you following your head? Are you following your heart? That's one kind of thing. And I think Ashley, you're a full moon too, aren't you?
Yep. Cancer.
Yeah, you're a stronger full moon than Gina is. So you'll have a little bit of that, you know, am I following my head, my heart? How do I combine those two? They're so different. So there's a lot of push pull in full moon people. And then you might notice you feel differently every month during the full moon, or things get a little bit more crazy for you. Just something fun to journal about every month. Gina's wheels are turning right now.
Yeah.
like Gina, we're doing a show. Come back. I can just see her eyes.
I'm out of here. You know what is so crazy? I was just thinking full moon. How do I feel during the full moon? And the last full moon was like that full moon in Virgo, and it was on Thursday, right? Last week?
Saturday.
I don't know what day it is anymore. The full moon was the 27th. So what day was that? A couple days ago.
Oh, that was Saturday. Never mind. I thought it was Saturday, but then I started doing all these full moon things on Thursday. And then on Saturday, I thought someone said the full moon was on Thursday. And I was just like, I don't know, but everything I did worked, I'm sure.
I like to follow the site, like your own cycle. I talk about this a lot on the show. It like is following your own cycle as it relates to the moon. So if you are, I'm using this as like if you have a womb. So if you do have a womb and you can follow your cycle, you'll be able to kind of match some of these energies. And so if you think about the full moon as sort of like that, has the most energy. It's the potent time when it's like, I like to think of it like actually as this circle, right? This circle through your cycle. And full moon is the same as like, is it? Oh shoot. Now I'm not. Okay. Take this part out, Gina. I don't want to go down.
Let me, I'll say one more thing about the full moon. So the sun.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
No, we're good today. Okay. The sun is our life force. It's bright. It shines, right? And the moon does not have its own light. It only has reflected light. So when the sun and the moon are opposite each other in the sky, that's a full moon, and the sun will illuminate the moon, which is really in astrology our unconscious self, not a part of ourselves that we're completely maybe have access to. So that's another thing a full moon person or a full moon each month can do, can illuminate something that you were previously unaware of. Sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes that's a very uncomfortable thing, wherever you are in that particular time in your life. But yes, it's an illuminating. And again, the moon does not have its own light. It needs to reflect light to be seen. Otherwise, it'd be a dark blob in the sky, and we would never see it without the sun.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Did it come back to you, Ashley?
Yes, it did. Thank you. I had to like figure out the full circle. Okay. So thinking about energy as it relates to the moon, one thing, just like specifically looking at the moon cycle that you were born in. So being close to a full moon, you might find that you're really good at manifesting things during that time. Like you just have more energy. You feel more closely connected to the moon when it's fuller. I know that's how I like when I do, typically the full moon is for letting things go. And that is very true. But for me, I do like to manifest over the full moon because I'm a full moon baby. So, looking at what phase of the moon you were born in can give you sort of like this special time of extra power, extra potency for you. And again, when we talk about self-care, I want to talk about manifestation as it relates to Aries. This is good. The second thing I was going to say about cycles and about the moon and just like how we can use this energetically and on like a physical plane is that if you are someone who is in a cycle, if you are, I want to say a womb carrier and you have a regular cycle each month, you can track that with the moon as well. And so the energy of a full moon is the same energy as ovulation, and the energy of a new moon is the same energy as menstruation, as the menstrual cycle. So if you think about that and you like kind of tie those up and you look at that, your cycle, if you again are a womb carrier, you can see when you might have more energy. Sometimes people that have their period on full moons, which is the opposite of what is like normal, are considered quote unquote witches, which is what like amazing, right? Like that's awesome. And they tend to be the ones that take care of others. So sort of tangential, but if you are interested in looking at your cycle as it compares to the moon, you can learn so much about your energy and how to use it.
That's so cool. Where did you get this lore about the full moon, new moon in the cycle? Because I'm trying to think of like my knowledge. So the new moon is to plant seeds, and I would think that'd be like the egg, busting out of the ovary or something, and then the full moon being that release. But you said it backwards than that.
So if you think of menstruation, it's the beginning of the cycle. When you're looking at like from a medical standpoint, when you're looking at your cycle, it starts when you bleed. And so that's why the new moon is considered like that's that same energy. But again, because we don't all cycle together, because that would be very challenging if we were all on the exact same cycle. There's people that do it at different times. And again, the role is just sort of like take care of each other. That's why some of us have more energy at different times. Like talk about the feminine, right? Our bodies are literally like taking care of each other. How flippin' cool is that?
Oh my God, that is really cool. I love that. I'm going to start doing that. Like tracking the moon cycle with my cycle.
There's a new app that literally someone sent me right before this. It's so funny that we're talking about this. I haven't really used it a lot. I like to use something called Natural Cycles to track my cycle, like with the basal body temperature thermometer. But there's something called Stardust. It's a free app, and it'll like tie your cycle to the moon cycle, and it'll tell you. So like, I guess you're like a red moon if you bleed during the full moon. I don't know. Is this what you wanted to talk about today, Gina, on Aries?
I'm up
Hey,
for
we're
it.
talking about blood, which is red, and Mars.
Sure,
Well,
there you go. I knew we'd land here. Yeah. Stardust. Stardust is the name of the app.
I wrote
Stardust.
it down.
Okay, I just wrote it down. Yeah. Oh, that is so interesting because I have noticed just a shift in my general mood at the times when I can line up my work with where I'm at in my cycle and what I know about myself based on where I'm at in my cycle. And it's an easy one, like, a lot of times when I bleed, I get a migraine. So that's kind of like, but I'm thankful that it like all lines up. Ooh, is this like a...
Ooh, yes, this made me think of something else. So I don't know if I mentioned this in other episodes, but every sign rules a body part, and Aries rules the head. And I've seen this evidence in my practice that most of the time, if people come in talking about headaches, I look at Aries in their chart, and Aries is, stressed, or they're not being themselves. So they get these headaches. That's interesting that you are an Aries moon and this happens to you.
Oh my God, because my migraines have ebbed and flowed like for 15 years and now they're synced up with my cycle. It could be for 1,000 reasons because I'm always working on it. But I used to notice when I was like in my wellness career and just like operating in corporate wellness, which at the heart is pretty out of alignment with who I am. And in that, I noticed my migraines would line up with like networking events or like speaking events I do where it was like, I don't want to work with any of these people. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I didn't like the work, but it was a good opportunity to,
Oh
make
yeah, that's
connections
your
or money.
Aries, like
Yeah.
you're following your true self, and that's the universe whapping you over the head,
Yes.
trying to get your attention. Yeah, I only had headaches as a kid, and as soon as I moved out of my parents' house, they like have never returned. And I'm like, maybe because like I grew up Catholic, so I was like was going to hell for everything. And once I started to shed that, like, yeah, my headaches never came back, and it must be an Aries thing.
And the latest thing, and I'm sharing this I'm sure I'm not the only one, not that I think you guys give a shit about my monthly cycle. But the other thing I was going to say was with the migraines, like typical coaching is like slow down, nap, as opposed to work out when you're bleeding. And for me, what I've noticed is that is actually recipe for if I'm going to get a migraine, it's going to be a bad migraine. Like I need to run myself like a wild dog, like do a hard workout every day, like the day before I bleed and then through the bleed. That's my best bet on like getting rid of a migraine or even preventing it at this point, which you had said. I took note of it because Meredith, you said earlier, like moving your body or something is important to Aries. Oh, that's really cool.
That was the top of my list. That's what I have for Aries is that movement, because there's just so much fire to burn off, and movement is great. Like you said, rest wise, Gina, like you can do like more nurturing practices. You can do yin, you can do all these things that are still movement. But for an Aries, I mean, like go flipping hard. Listen to what your body is saying. There's this awesome podcast episode on Brene Brown's show that she did. I feel like I've talked about it on this before. I literally tell it to everybody. It's like the best thing on the internet. But it was this episode of an interview with Emily and Amelia Nagoski, and they have this book called Burnout. And this book is about closing the emotional stress cycle loop and the ways that we can do that, the ways that we can work with our stress, right? We can address the stress within our body. Let's call it fire. Let's call for an Aries, like the fire within our bodies.
Oh, I like that.
Not necessarily the trigger. Like I can't do anything about the trigger. I can't do anything about the dick that like yelled out the window, like cat called me, like F him, what? But I can work on the stress that it caused within me. And the number one thing that they suggest is movement. And so I just think for an Aries, it's like you said, your Aries moon, to process that through. High intensity workout is a really good thing.
Yeah. Oh, I feel that for sure. Okay. Anything else anyone wants to add? Otherwise, we'll move on to a couple other questions. I've got a couple
more tips for all your Aries self-carers out there. Okay, so we talked about movement, which is super true. I talked a little bit about manifestation, and I think this is where that like taking the power back comes into play. So when you're in Aries and you want to nurture yourself and you want to use this energy, bring it back to you. Use your competitive spirit to set goals for yourself and to trust in your own power versus always looking outward. That external validation is just going to kind of send you the opposite way. So self-study, and I know I said this before, but like self-study and finding out more about you, doing the reprogramming work, the not easy, but very effective reprogramming work, going into meditation, doing work with you, Gina, to figure out like, was it a past life where this keeps coming up, and like addressing those things and really owning who we are. Astrology, like the most the most validating thing that you can do to find out who you are. And then own it, flip and own that power and use it to make the things happen in your life. Aries they're gonna make stuff happen. There's like no question there. But when they feel sort of apologetic about that, it's just not, it's that fire starts to burn out a little. And so I just think it's an unapologetic self-study and self-care. Like if there's any guilt associated with self-care for any of the signs, but especially for Aries, like bring it back. Like, no, this is about you. You need to take care of yourself as much as you possibly can. Yeah. So I'm just like, I'm a fan of normally you look at an Aries and you wouldn't necessarily be like, whoa, major manifester. But I think an Aries that's really in their power and they know who they are can use that to make things happen.
Oh,
Love it.
man, Ashley, I love that. The getting to know who you are, but then also how you equated stress to fire. Because like not all stress is bad, not all fire is bad, but like
Right.
too much or it left unchecked or monitored or being mindful of a fire could burn out of control, right? Just like stress. Stress isn't bad. Stress can push you to leave a relationship that's super painful. It can help you get a new job. It can help us do a lot of stuff, but being able to think of it not in terms of like, oh, I shouldn't feel stressed. Because I think a lot of times, especially if we're mindful, like on a conscious path of evolution, which is the people listening to this podcast, because if you've made it this far and you're not on a conscious path of evolution, I don't know how you haven't left me a 1-star review yet and exercise your free will. But anyway, I'm just thinking of it in terms of like thinking about that. Sometimes we can feel like, oh, I'm stressed. And then on top of that is like, oh, I shouldn't feel stressed. I know this is bad for me. And we can just kind of pile it on. So instead thinking of it as like, it's okay. And I can actually, how can I use this to my advantage as opposed to just kind of, falling victim to it. I love that.
And stress is it is a good thing. It's chronic stress that isn't, right? It's when we're in a constant state of stress that becomes a problem. And like high intensity workout or even just like movement or yoga, any of that, that's stress. That's putting actual physical stress onto your body. And the more that you do it and the more that you're able to overcome it and move through it and like, tapas is a word that we use in yoga, and that's heat. That's that stress. That's what I think of as tapas in class, right? We do that so that when we're dealt some real flippin' stressors in our life, we're more capable of handling it.
Yeah. I love the way you put that. Yes. Okay. I have so many notes. All right. I am going to link that Brene Brown episode. I will link the Stardust app, just so we all know that.
I also have an episode on cycles, on using the moon for your cycle. So if you want to link that up too, feel free.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So a couple questions for you two. And my question, these two questions, like whoever wants to start, whoever wants to input, maybe for you, Meredith, because I already asked you this, but I am an identical twin. So my twin and I were born 15 minutes apart. And I always have the question of like, but our lives are very different, right? Like she has kids. She is like, stays home with the kids. I don't have kids. I'm an entrepreneur. So our lives look very different. But I'm just wondering, like, how does that work with twins?
Great question. So I get this question a lot, and my mentor that I studied under for years was an identical twin. My dad's an identical twin, so I do have some experience. And Aries, anywhere in the chart would be tough being a twin because Aries is the sign of the self. So twins very early on will want to be their own individuals. And the thought is they split the birth chart. One twin might be more of the moon sign. One twin might be more of the sun sign. You and your twin very possibly have different rising signs. If you're born 15 minutes apart, that would be something to look into. And there's also like, you can get down to the nitty gritty into the birth chart. So 15 minutes apart is actually a big deal. Think about spinning a wheel and then putting a notch on that wheel. It's still going to be pretty far apart. And what you can do is like get into stars and asteroids and where they are in the charts. And those are going to change in 15 minutes. A lot of C-sections these days are, I think legally, they have to put a minute apart. And really the birth chart is based on the moment you take your first breath. So I don't know what C-sections or when babies, take that first gasp.
Oh.
I've never been in that delivery room, and how many minutes apart are they? I think legally they put a minute now. But there is, again, you're splitting the birth chart, and it sounds like Gina, your sister, might be more doing the Libra thing. While you're doing more of the Aries thing, the entrepreneur, the kind of, it'd be interesting to meet her and talk to both of you. But yeah, it's very interesting. Like my dad's identical twin, and we don't quite know how many minutes they were apart because my grandma didn't know she was having twins back in the day. It was like, oh man, guys, there's another one in there. So the doctor scrambled and didn't write down on their birth certificates. They were officially put a minute apart, but I don't think that's physically possible for natural births for twins.
Yeah.
Maybe it is. I don't know. But my dad is, family man. He went to medical school, and his identical twin is a Catholic priest. So very different.
Oh, wow.
And I have broken down their charts, and I have come to the conclusion that they switched them at birth based on their times. So I think my uncle was always the one that was older, but the more I look at their charts, I'm like, no, I think somebody mixed them up, because I can break down the chart to the minute and different details. And I'm like, okay, Catholic priest, doctor, different, very different. And I think they were switched at some point. Whether that was, not switched at birth, but one was actually older and the other one grew up thinking they were older, which is not true.
Yeah,
but I can't, prove it, but I could get 10 other astrology opinions to see if other astrologers think that as well. So Gina, it'd be interesting to break down, well, I guess, who's older. Were you ever switched, like within the how do they keep you apart? The first year, do they put a mark on your foot, or how do they?
Yeah. This is a great question, Meredith. We had hospital bracelets on, and my mom kept them on, she says, for like 4 months.
Right.
And then one day she was like, I don't know.
She could tell you apart.
Yeah, I got this. Cut the bracelets off. And then like turned around and was like, oh shit, who's who?
Right. Usually there's like a freckle, a freckle that or a mole or something, or one is bigger than the other. But yeah, it's tough when they're identical babies.
Yeah. So she called my sister in, who at the time was 4 years old. And she was like, Sarah, which one's Gina? Which one's Jess? And she pointed us out. And my mom was just like, that's what I thought. Okay, so
that was that child. Back on. So your older sister could pick you out based probably more on energy.
So that's like the
characteristics.
Yeah, like she wasn't reading the hospital bracelets.
Right.
And my older sister I should have all my family's charts read. But my oldest sister has always been, she was like a third parent, Okay. Do you know anything about twins, Ashley? Anything that you've come across in your study of astrology?
I've thought about, I'm so glad that we talked about this today, because I've had this question before, and I have a lot of friends who are twins who've asked me, and I'm like, well, you would have different charts if you were born at different times. And even would the houses be different, Meredith? Like how much? So like things are going to play out differently in your life based on the houses as they're changing. So my grandma's a twin, and then I feel like there's just like everybody's a twin in my family, which I'm like, as we're preparing for like building more children in our life, I'm like, oh man, if I have twins, that's like a lot. Yowzer.
Yeah, there's rumors that twins skip generations, and that is totally true in my family. On both sides, the twins have skipped generations, and I don't know if that's just lore or if there's science behind that, but I have noticed that. But I also have friends that are twins that actually had twins. So it's like funny.
Oh man.
It's very hereditary.
Like,
yeah.
It's very, now that I think about it, my husband's grandma's a twin too. So we both have grandmas that are twins.
Oh, cool.
Tread lightly.
Right.
Okay, so my next question probably, I'd imagine, could be a whole episode, but the whole thing about Saturn return. So I am so curious about this because, first of all, I'm curious about myself and like when it was, because my life is peppered with moments where I say, like, I never really hit rock bottom, but like my own personal emotional rock bottoms, I like my ass hits the floor a few times a decade. And when I think of Saturn returns, I know the time in my life and I'm like, I wonder exactly where it was. But then I think I Googled it one day and Saturn returns then comes back like in your late 50s, early 60s. Is
That's
that right?
the second one, right? So I have the dates.
So many of my clients are in both of those age ranges, which I think is so interesting.
Yep. So let's do a little bit about Saturn, and then this could be a totally different episode because we could pull in past lives and all that kind of stuff too. So the Saturn return, Saturn takes 28, 29 years on average to go around the sun. So at age 28, 29, everybody will have their Saturn return. And Saturn rules the sign of Capricorn, which is my sun sign. So my Saturn return was not really a big deal. I'm friends with Saturn just because I'm a Capricorn. And this in astrology is like, do you have your shit together? Are you taking responsibility for your actions? Are you thinking about your future? Are you not being super selfish? Like all that kind of stuff. And if you're not quite on the right path, Saturn will only throw you a crisis if you aren't. So my Saturn return, I mean, I bought a house, I got animals, I probably got a promotion. Like I just did kind of like taking more responsibility, putting down roots, that kind of thing. My husband's Saturn return, dumpster fire. He got his ass handed to him. It was rough. And I was dating him at the time. He turned it around though. Like that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to learn the lesson and do the work. Saturn wants you to work on yourself, really, because it's for the highest good for you and the highest good for the universe. And not everyone does that work. And that's kind of a tipping point in lives. Are you going to step up, take responsibility, or are you going to go the other direction? And Gina, the hottest months for you was August through October 2010. So I did look that up for you. It was basically fall of 2010. But the Saturn return, there's different theories about it. Some astrologers think it starts when Saturn enters the sign it was at your birth. I kind of work with just the hottest moments of it, which is going to be, you might just get one pass of Saturn, but due to retrograde, Saturn might come back. So you might get 1 to 2 to 3 hits of Saturn during your Saturn return. It depends on your personal chart and the retrograde period. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay.
The fall of 2010.
That was when it was the hottest, the most potent Saturn energy. But it's really on you for about a year, up to 2. You're going to be feeling it. Saturn does not do things overnight. He might throw you a crisis overnight, but then you got to do the long, slow, hard Saturn way to kind of rebuild and recover from whatever he throws you.
Man, someday I'll just like open my life and just be like, okay, everybody listen to every recording I have. I think of what was going on in the fall of 2010. And to me, I don't know if it's like a Libra thing or something else, but like that was a year before I met Alex. And that was like just some pivotal things, not necessarily the people I was dating, but how I was taking ownership of it. And I just remember being like, I was hitting the stride where it was like, I just felt like relationships for me were showing me like exactly what you said, Meredith, where it's like, here's the lesson. Are you going to learn it or not? Like, are you going to take responsibility or not?
Not only are you a Libra, but when you were born, Saturn was in Libra. So even before you even have your Saturn return, you're going to be able to pick out the themes of it. So because you were born with Saturn in Libra, your Saturn lesson is going to be about relationships. In a nutshell.
Fuck.
Right?
Okay.
I can go into more of that. I mean, it gets really complicated, but just in a nutshell, like look at the sign Saturn was at your birth, and that's going to give you a picture of what you can expect. And yeah, Aries, Moon, Libra, Sun, not BFFs with Saturn. So you'd maybe struggle a little bit more than, maybe the Earth signs or Capricorn like myself. And Ashley, I'm curious about your Saturn return. And I think we talked a little bit maybe offline about yours. I think you had a baby.
Yeah.
The theory is like your Saturn return baby is your special one. There's something usually unique about the Saturn return baby.
Well, Lily, there's that Aries.
Oh, was that Lily?
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because you and I, you've done sessions with me, Gina, where we've discovered that Lily has been a sister, like 100% sister energy with Lily. And so my Saturn's in Sagittarius, and my Saturn return was when I was 28, because I'm 0 degrees Cancer. So 28, 29. And I remember learning to really get truthful, Sagittarius, about what I wanted. And I wanted children, which I told myself for flipping 30 years that I didn't. But like when I really got down to it, I was like, no, I do. I really do. And I just want to teach yoga. I'm going to do it. And so I quit my job, got pregnant with Lily. And I mean, my children are my actual spiritual awakenings. Like I have like specific markers of things that they've done. And so just makes total sense. To me, it wasn't a wildly painful Saturn return. It felt like a course correction that like just was going to happen. Like the lessons had been coming, and that was like almost the closure of those lessons.
Yeah, interesting, because you got that Capricorn moon, so you're better friends with Saturn, and then your Saturn return was about your truth, which is Sagittarius. And I'm wondering if you got a little bit more woo-woo back then, or more into kind of the stuff you're doing now, because you got 8th house Saturn. So
yeah, I mean, it was like yoga.
Yeah.
Yoga. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I love that you say that, because something that like with forecasts and astrology and stuff like that, a lot of times it can be like, oh shit, this is going to be really difficult. Like I'd imagine someone who's, if they're listening to this and they're like 26 or 27 or 28, they're like, oh,
no, I get a lot of, early mid 20s. They're like so freaked out by Saturn coming up. And I'm like, don't fear Saturn. I know he's sometimes get a bad reputation, but as long as you're doing the work, and you feel like you're on the right path, you take responsibility for your actions, you'll be fine.
Do you think that a lot of these things can be a lot less painful or more illuminating, depending on which one it is, if you're just on a path of conscious evolution? Like as long as you're mindful, as long as you're right, like, and sometimes I wonder that, because I'll hear like, oh, this could be, a time of, I don't know, relationship strain or something. And it's like, well, I guess we are having conversations about this, but I don't necessarily, it's not like as dramatic as where it might sound. And maybe it's because I've done some work underneath. I see that a lot, where for me, it's like, oh shit, this could be bad. And then it's like, well, actually,
we are all wired like that. Like Saturn's on me right now, and he's been coming for me for this part of my chart for 28 years. And I'm just like, what is it? But I'm like, okay, just be mindful, be conscious, it'll be okay. And Saturn is the last planet we can see with the naked eye. So historically, he was the edge of the universe. He can represent boundaries and restrictions. So Saturn lessons sometimes come with how to set healthy boundaries, towards other people in your relationship with kids, with parents, whatever it is. So boundaries is a lot of what I see showing up in the Saturn return, late 20s.
Ooh.
That's a tough one. That's a really tough boundary setting. How do you make everybody happy with that? You don't.
You don't.
You
make
don't
yourself
much in
happy.
Saturn. Yeah.
Yeah. Very much my journey with boundaries has been like, really be okay with people not being happy with you.
Yep.
Like
and
that's like
Saturn. That's where he gets a bad reputation. Saturn does not make everyone happy. That's Jupiter.
Yeah.
That's another story. Yep.
So then when Saturn comes, the Saturn return, like in your late 50s comes, is that similar, or is
that okay? So like late 20s, you're like, what am I going to be doing in the next 30 years of my life? What is my career? Yeah. What is my path? Am I a family person? What is it? Second Saturn return is, well, time to starting to get out of the workforce, like maybe start thinking about retirement. Grandparent, usually you're a grandparent. Historically, you had, your babies at the first Saturn return, and then you become a grandparent at the second Saturn return. So another kind of responsibility shift, and, more layers added, foundations to your family. So it could be all kinds of things. And then once, if you're lucky, you get a third Saturn return.
How old would you be when that comes?
What's 29 plus 57, 58, 80,
like almost
late
90.
80s, late 80s. Yep.
Oh man. Okay. Anything else to add? Otherwise we'll land this plane.
Or jump out of it, as an Aries would prefer.
Oh, snap.
Put on your backpacks, because you're about to get pushed out of an airplane.
One last tidbit on Aries. We kind of went all over the place today, but Aries, again, like that thrill seeking, that movement. And Aries is the sign, again, that sprung us all to life. And they're the sign that wants to feel alive. And they do that by like firing up that fire and that thrill seeking. And like, that's how they feel alive. When they're doing them and feeling good and just living in pure raw fuel of the moment. That's how I think of Aries. And again,
wow, that's beautiful.
Some Aries are the sports people or the Olympians or the people that go skiing on top of mountains and do like the thrill seeking stuff. But they're all over the place. Like Ashley admitted to, like I struggle with Aries because it doesn't fit every single Aries. I have yet to meet a triple Aries. I've met a few double Aries. But even with the double Aries, they don't always say they're risk taking. And yeah, it's not always textbook sign for me.
Yeah. All right, we did it. It's our third installment, Aries edition.
Thank you, Dina.
Thank you so much for being here. And we will be back with Meredith and Ashley next month for it's Taurus, right?
Taurus.
Taurus.
Yes.
Meredith, you one time told me I attract wounded Tauruses. So I'll be asking about that. Heads up.
Oh, wait. I'm looking at the chart. I'm like, that doesn't make sense, but it's Ashley's. Never mind. Okay. I'll have some intel on that.
Okay, thanks. There it is. That is our episode for today. I can't thank you enough for being here, listening, sharing this podcast with your friends. My hope is that you had as much fun listening to that as it was recording it. All right, this episode brought to you by me. I do the recording, editing, publishing. I do all the artwork. If you like what you hear, I love it. I work my ass off for it. Thank you, and I'd love your support. You can pass this episode to a friend. You can go to Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star rating. I would really appreciate all of that. Thank you so much for being here. Open to the power of these fun conversations. Thank you. Take anything in this episode that helped you and just leave the rest.